Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I'm a lot older than most of you, but the gentleman from the 15th, gentleman from the 24th, the gentleman from the 23rd, and the minority leader, we have age on us. And the young lady from the 3rd. Y'all know what happened back during the day. Let's make no mistake about what this bill is about. The election did not turn out the way you wanted it to turn out. That's what it's about. When you talk about ID match, the absentee ballot, the signature goes into the county board of elections. They cross it if you got a driver's license or any other records they have, and if they have a question, then they call you and send you an official document asking you to come in to verify. Now, I'm a blues singer, and I like rhythm and blues. And two songs go with what you're doing. One by the Isley Brother, Here We Go Again. And one by Teddy Pendergrass that said, wake up everybody, there's no more sleeping in bed, no more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. And let me tell you what you're doing. And I'm surprised at the gentleman that came down here to speak on behalf of this bill, especially where you're from. Especially where you're from. You know, from Perry to Byron, Georgia, there are folks who don't have ways of transportation to get into places. They got to pay somebody. But what this bill reminds me of, you know, you got a car, and you got a rear view mirror in the car, and the rear view mirror tells you where you're coming from. And if you don't know where you're coming from, how you know where you're going? But it reminds me of the election of 1876, when President Grant was supposed to run for a 3rd term and he wouldn't run. And they had the Republican convention, and they were trying to find somebody to run. Had a guy by the name of Blaine, but they didn't think he could win. And they went and got Governor Rutherford Hayes out of Ohio. And for the Democrats, it was a guy by the name of Samuel J. Tilden from New York. And Tilden was beating Hayes by 260,000 popular votes. And what happened? In Washington, D.C., there was a hotel owned by a black man by the name of Wormley. And Hayes was losing the race, one of the closest presidential elections. That's where we have the Electoral College now. They formed a commission back then. And it was Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. And prior to then, South Carolina was more populated by blacks than whites. And yes, we were in the halls of Congress. And what happened, Hayes went to a black man's hotel and cut a deal with the southern states. And they pulled out the federal troops. And when they pulled out the federal troops, in his inaugural speech, Hayes said that it's time to let the South run the government. And when they did that, they put out federal troops. And that's when we had Jim Crow and folks got lynched. In South Carolina, had a group called the Red Shirts. And they were supporting Tilden. And they created ballots. And folks were voting on it, didn't know what they were voting on. They gave Tillman the majority of the votes in South Carolina. Now, I would be negligent in my duties representing the 26th Senatorial District to go for this malarkey. That's what it is. But not only what you're doing, you're getting ready to spend state money to fight. Because we're going to fight. Folks voted in the election. A lot of us voted against Trump. And a lot of folks that look like you voted against Trump. And here we're going to perpetuate this big lie, fraud. If the Secretary of State hadn't recorded what Trump said, Trump lied on him too. He got no problem lying. I just tell you, sad to come down here all these years when you can walk up on the fourth floor on the high side of the gallery and you can look at the history of Georgia and those of us of color, how we've been elected. Now, it's amazing. I didn't think it. I had to come to the well after 45 years of being in this body. And I probably had a lot of friends before today. But I want to tell you, we're going to fight. There's no question about what's going to happen. And you're going to spend taxpayers' money trying to defend it. As I go back home and I look in that mirror and see where I came from, there's one thing about being in politics. You make friends, and sometimes you make enemies. But I will tell you one thing about David Lucas, that I'm going to fight you with all the vigor I can. Because I will not go back home and tell those folks who voted that I took away the right for you to vote. And that's what this bill is about. Every last one of the election bills is about the election didn't turn out the way y'all want, and you want to perpetuate the lie that Trump told. Well, if I don't fight you, if I don't fight you, I hope my tongue cleave to the top of my mouth. And the cutting power of my right hand ceases to be. And then, that's when we'll know the true words of what Martin Luther King said. Free at last, free at last. Thank God about it. We're free at last.